Hi everyone, welcome to this interview by COREcruitment. My name is Krishnan Doyle. I'm the founder of Core, and we're an international recruitment agency that deal with exec and non-exec appointments across mid and senior level. Now, we've been running this interview series for about 6 months now, and we've been meeting some really amazing industry characters, chief executives, business leaders, business founders, all people who are doing interesting things across the sectors that we operate in. And you can view all of these on our website, www.corerecruitment.com. On Spotify or on our YouTube account as well. Now, this next person who we're going to be interviewing, I am really excited about meeting because we've done lots of bits with them over the years, but also I'm a customer of theirs as well. Every time we go to Norwich or any time that I'm in Bristol, I'm always make sure that I kind of stop in, and it's the founder and chair of Lounges, Alex Reilley. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. Yeah,
excellent.
Sort of bearing up under the strain of everything that's being chucked at us, but no, all good.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Now, my introduction to Lounges was that there was a chap called Alex Marsh who worked with you guys years and years and years ago. And he said, you have to come down to Bristol. You have to get to know the business. So we talked on the train, went down to Bristol. We didn't have the office there at the time. Obviously, it was 10 plus years ago. And went to your office, and I was sitting waiting to go in, and I was sat on this kind of antique furniture couch, and there were all of these kind of like, much like the pictures behind you, these massive frames, these massive pictures, these tables which were kind of falling apart and all of that kind of stuff. And I told somebody that I was there, and they bumbled off to get Alex, and I was sitting there for a couple of minutes, and I saw this guy in the corner who was kind of like looking at tables and looking at chairs and moving things around and kicking and poking things, and ended up having a chat with him for about 5 minutes about soft furnishings and what would fit where, and kind of like there was some bit falling off or something. And then when Alex finally came and got me, and we went upstairs together to have a chat about recruitment and life and everything else, he actually said, "Oh, did you know that's Alex? That's one of the founders." And I was like, what? Who is this guy who's kind of like, doing this stuff? No word of offense. I thought you might be the janitor, the caretaker, or like the project manager or something like that. But that level of detail from step one in terms of like the way that you curate the establishment, it's pretty incredible. Do you still do that now?
I don't do that now, but I mean, I did actually do that, probably until the point we had, I'd guess maybe 70 sites, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was all, when we first set out, we used to buy everything from eBay or from antique/junk shops, and we would source everything, pretty much ourselves, and we used to really, it was actually really enjoyable. It was very time consuming.
Yeah.
To your point. One of the challenges that you often have if you're buying sort of reclaimed furniture is that it often looks good, but lasts 5 minutes when you put it in a commercial hospitality environment. So we work very hard to sort of find suppliers that could end up doing that for us and do all the sourcing for us. So we've got a network of people that we now use and have used for a number of years that do all of the sort of sourcing for us, and thankfully, the stuff that we generally get now is more fit for purpose.
Excellent. I mean, God, that's a lot of house clearances to go to, Alex. I'm just going to throw it out there. Good Lord. Now, to get a bit of an overview of the business, you guys started 2002, 3 friends. I did some reading up on this with a £30,000 bank loan, kind of like, and money that you scraped together from everywhere between you to the size of the businesses across the 3 brands now. Can you just tell us about, in terms of size of business, where you guys are and what you guys are covering currently?
So we currently sit on 313 sites in the UK, of which the rump is our lounges. So there's 273 of those. Turnover for this financial year, so our financial year started at the end of April, should hopefully exceed 500 million. Which obviously is a bit of a major milestone, really, for the business in terms of where we were and where we are now. So yeah, we're clearly we're clearly a very different business to when we would have first met, and the growth of the business has been nothing short of phenomenal. But it's interesting because it's only really with the benefit of having to sort of pause and stop and think about how the hell we've got to where we've got to, that you feel slightly terrified. At no stage during that during that time has it ever felt as if it was something that was beyond our control, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, 100%. And then, so between Lounge, Cosy Club, and Brightside, if you can just focus on the Brightside side of things for a minute, because there's sort of 4 sites there on A roads. Tell us a bit about the concept and how it's developing.
So, I mean, we launched Brightside probably 2.5 years ago, I guess, and the sort of we set out really to try and give people an option for somewhere that is a bit more of a sort of sit down, proper hospitality experience on the side of a road. I think our view is that what we get on the side of a road is very quick service. It's very sort of grab and go, and I think we sort of hark back a little bit to remembering our childhoods when we'd stop at the likes of Little Chef and Happy Eater, and it was a bit more of an occasion. So Brightside is almost a sort of 21st century reinvention of that kind of notion, that instead of wanting to get from A to B as quickly as possible, you actually are factoring in a stop and a bit more of an experience. And we launched the first 3 down in the southwest. So there's 2 on the A38, 1 on the 303, and then we launched on the A1 about 18 months ago. And it's been interesting. I mean, the business is in fantastic like-for-like growth. If we were judging the success of a brand on the strength of its NPS score alone, it would be a fantastic success. And we're encouraged with where we're going with regards to where the sales are going with regards to Brightside. But we started from I think it's fair to say, a much lower base from a turnover perspective than we perhaps anticipated, which is probably not surprising given that you're launching something which nobody knows what it is. And people's initial exposure to that is that they're probably traveling at 50, 60 miles an hour, and they just sort of whiz past it and perhaps think, what the hell was that? So it's been a very different experience from us from a marketing perspective, because we've had to really think a lot more intensely about how we market the brand and how we get the brand name out there. Obviously, the best thing you can do is just deliver consistently great hospitality experiences when people go into a Brightside. But we've had to try and really, sort of push along the sort of people's awareness of the brand. But we're getting there. But it's been slower than we'd anticipated. But we're still, we're very encouraged with where we're at. And I think, if we continue on the growth trajectory which we're enjoying, and have enjoyed really since we've opened, we'll sort of get to a place where probably in 18 months' time from now, where it becomes something that we might look at doing additional sites, Brightsides.
Excellent. Now, to get a little bit into your property kind of mission, because I mean, especially with a lot of that, I mean, there are beautiful sites across the estate, but especially within the Cosy Club side of the business, you've got some absolutely phenomenal locations, mostly market towns, and you have famously managed to avoid that central London kind of side of things as well. Can you just give us a little bit about the criteria when you're looking for a site, when you're looking for a location? And I guess, how many more market towns are there in the UK, Alex?
Well, I mean, as I said, currently we've got 273 lounges, and I think we stand behind a list of 600 sites that we believe are achievable in the UK. So we're not yet 50% of the way through that list, and it's not as if we're picking off the sort of top 300 sites, and then the second 300 will be inferior in any shape or form. We haven't yet opened anything in Scotland. We're relatively early in terms of our presence in the northeast, and there continues to be opportunities in established territories. We're now up to 24 sites in Wales, and we've got another 3 Welsh sites opening this year. So it's really interesting. It's sort of towns where lounge works. There are locations where we've opened recently where perhaps 10 years ago we wouldn't have felt that location was necessarily suitable. Mm-hmm. But I think what we've seen is the way that people use and understand casually eating and drinking and going out. We're seeing that seep, sort of almost deeper into just sort of UK everyday society and everyday activities. So, we still see a lot of opportunity in the UK. There's still a lot of runway for us, and I think we're still going to towns that I've never heard of and never been to, and I've been to a lot of towns. I spend probably 1 to 2 days a month on the road with the property team, where they'll take me to an area of the country, and we'll look at opportunities, some of which will be in towns that we know, but more often than not, they'll be in towns that we've not visited previously. And it always amazes me how there's still these sort of golden nugget towns out there that very few people have heard of, that have got that still have got a reasonably strong high street. And so the opportunity remains in the UK to be very exciting. And I think the kind of buildings that we have historically been able to sort of consider, they tended to be conversions of retail units, sometimes in nice buildings, but more often than not, relatively bland concrete boxes. Whereas now, sadly, because of the demise of high street banks, we're seeing a lot more really beautiful heritage buildings, which convert very, very nicely. They're not easy to convert because they're often very solidly built, and if you need to sort of smash the walls down and there's a strong room in the way, that's a big issue. But I think those kind of opportunities are really exciting because the kind of sites we're opening are really attractive, and they as I say, I think people like the opportunity to be able to go into a nice building on a high street and in their town, and that helps that helps us in many respects. But we're still very, very good at making a fairly bland concrete box building look pretty good. So yeah, we're not constrained in terms of the kind of buildings that we look for. We obviously have a preference, but we can convert all sorts of buildings and make them look great, either as a lounge or a Cosy Club.
And in terms of format, because if you look at something the size of, say, in Bristol, Returno, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but it's like I've been in, and it is massive. And when I initially walked in, I didn't equate it with being a lounge in my head. Yeah. Almost like, but if you get are you looking at more big box sites like that in the future, do you think?
Yeah, I think we've sort of I guess we've got a lot more confident with regards to being able to trade from larger sites in very, very high footfall locations, and Retorno, as you point out, is a very, very big site. Former Pitch and Piano, it's the number one performing lounge in the estate, which to anyone that knows the estate would not be surprised that it is the number one site. But we are looking at opportunities that are perhaps a bit on the bigger side, where we're anticipating high levels of sales, where the investment that's required might well be well above average, but where we think the opportunity is well above average. So there's definitely a sort of a confidence in those kind of locations. I mean, waterside locations water is just like, it just draws people in. It's sort of, and that just isn't, that's not just a sort of nice weather phenomenon. People are drawn to water, throughout the year, and so we're very focused on those kind of opportunities. And whilst they're not exclusively the kind of opportunities we're looking at, we are seizing those kind of opportunities when we sort of see them.
Absolutely. Are we allowed to talk about Germany?
We can, yeah. We are. So Germany is something that we've been looking at for a couple of years, and we spent some time, quite a lot of time in Germany, actually trying, really getting under the skin of understanding the German market. And I think we're very encouraged, and I think quietly sort of optimistic that us opening something in Germany could have legs. And I think if we could prove something works in Germany, that's exciting, because it's interesting. Whenever I've mentioned it to people, or people have asked me about Germany, invariably the first question they tend to ask is, why Germany? Which is a fair enough question. But I walk down a German high street, and it feels familiar. That their high streets are structured in a very, very similar way to a UK high street. I feel less certain about walking down a French high street, or a Spanish high street, or an Italian high street. I think there are a lot of similarities between British and German consumers. I think the general feel, or our gut feel, I think, about Germany is that it is like the UK was probably 25 years ago. So it's got I think there's a lot of opportunity there with regards to how people will start to embrace, sort of all-day hospitality on a more frequent basis. So, yeah, we'll see. It's something that I think that we're, as I said, we're excited about, and it's a big country, and unlike the UK, it's not as dominated by one city. I mean, Berlin is only 3.5 million people, so you've got 70 million people there, and there's a lot of small towns, and I think if we could prove, the lounge type model in Germany, the number of site opportunities out there is pretty big.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things which I think has contributed massively to your success is this kind of stealth chain kind of model where kind of like everybody thinks their lounge is their lounge and their Cosy Club is their, especially the Cosy Clubs. I mean, I've got to say, like, some, like, they are just beautiful. I take my parents-in-law for dinner there kind of like, all the time in Norwich. It's a great site. But like, with that, like, being the size and scale that you are now, is the plan, like, how are you managing your local marketing, and like, how do you manage to get that level of, I guess, localization, correct?
I think that, particularly lounge, given that there's so many of them now, it's very difficult for us to pretend that we're hiding in plain sight. When we launched in Bristol, Bristol's always had a sort of fairly, I wouldn't say fierce, but it's always had a real air of independence about it. People always loved independent operators. There was a bit of an aversion towards chains, and lots of brands had sort of come to Bristol and had failed, and we were very conscious about the fact we didn't want to be perceived as a chain. So we went down this slightly convoluted route of obviously giving each lounge its own name, and for some reason deciding they had to end in O, which has become a little bit of an Achilles heel for us because there are only so many words, so many good words that end in O. But so I think that gave the sort of business a sense of the fact that it was something that was a bit more individual. But I think the most important way in which we sort of really ensure that there is a sense of independence about a lounge and about someone's, people feel very personal about the lounge that's local to them is that we don't take anything for granted. So, we make it abundantly clear to our teams that we have to earn our place on the high street. It's really important that the engagement that we are doing is very much at a local community-led level, because that's where ultimately our customers are going to see that we're really making the right kind of effort and the right kind of steps to ensure that we really earn our place and embed into the local community. So, we always employ, in an ideal world, a general manager or a head chef of one of our sites would walk down their high street on their day off, and that journey would take them 3 or 4 times longer than it should do, because people are stopping them to chat to them because they recognise them as being someone that works at the local lounge. And that's a sort of, I think that's where we differ to, quite a lot of, say, the coffee shops, for example, where I think there is just a sort of, they just dump a site and they just sort of almost move on to the next one. I think we're intrinsically fascinated by how we can be better by being more community focused, and that's quite difficult because you can't be too prescriptive about how you ask your teams to engage with community. You almost have to, you almost are leading a bit by example and shining a light on what's great, but not necessarily criticising when people don't necessarily engage as much as we would like them to. So it's almost a sense of you're positively encouraging people, but not penalising them if they don't engage to the level that you perhaps wished that they would do. Because I think lots of people get community wrong once they start thinking, right, okay, well, we need to have a community initiative, and it's all something that's set out by at HQ, and then it's just distributed to all the sites, and people are told you need to do this, and here's the checklist. It loses all of its authenticity. So we give our teams a lot of freedom and flexibility, which allows them to express themselves in their local community, and therefore we attract people to us who want to work for us that see that as a really positive attribute with regards to their role with loungers.
Love that. I mean, it's definitely an approach which is working. Stepping away from the business side of things and onto your personal journey a little bit. Now that you have been quoted as saying this, so I'm not just being rude, but you've said that you had some fairly disastrous A-level results. I'm right in saying that you didn't go to uni, didn't get the MBA, didn't do all of that kind of stuff. You run one of the biggest, most successful like hospitality businesses, kind of like within the UK, soon to be globally, and like. I guess from an education perspective, from an encouraging people through, I mean, I love hospitality. I think it's a great industry, but developing people through who haven't got kind of academic qualifications, where do you kind of stand on that? And what do you think we could be doing as a sector to improve the footfall in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sector obviously has historically had, it's got better, but it still lingers. There's this sort of sense that it's a sector that attracts people that, like me, probably haven't necessarily fulfilled their potential academically, or just aren't academic at all, or there's never this sense of hospitality is a genuine career. It's almost as if I remember when I sort of said I wanted to go into hospitality, and almost like friends of my parents would just go, "Oh, it's just such a shame." It's sort of like, why is it a shame? I'm doing something I really enjoy. And surely life is about enjoyment. And if we spend a lot of time at work, and if you enjoy your work, that's a bonus. And clearly the opportunity within hospitality now is very different to arguably when I first decided it was the sector for me back in the early 90s. And I think I look at the people that have come through our business. We employ over 10,000 people now. We've got people that have been with us for over 20 years, which is just an incredible, feel very proud of that, feel very proud of the amount of jobs we've created and the amount of progression opportunities that we have within our business, the amount of people that have progressed within our business you get an awful lot of fulfillment from that, because it's at the end of the day, yes, you could get very excited about what we do from a financial perspective, but we're a people industry, and it's also a people industry that is unlikely to be replaced by AI or by sort of other means. That's the great joy of hospitality. It makes it very complicated, but it's also very rewarding when you get it right. And I think the sector really it should be held in higher regard within UK society. The government should recognise its value and the opportunities that it creates, particularly for young people who perhaps don't have the kind of confidence that they might otherwise have had were it not for things like COVID and just the fact that we're very, very tech sort of orientated sort of society now. And I think to see how people can use hospitality to develop, even if they use that as a stepping stone to do other things.
Yeah.
It's got a really important role to play, and unfortunately, we just fall foul of the fact that there is a perception of hospitality within the UK that it's a second-class industry or profession to go into, which is not helped in any shape or form by the way it's seen politically. So I think there's also a sense that hospitality is, I think if you look at our current government, I think they don't like hospitality because we are a national living wage paying industry. National living wage has obviously gone up hugely over the last few years. And you could argue that we're all complying with that, but they don't want people to earn national living wage. They want people to earn more than that. And I understand, the ambition of that, but what they have failed to understand is how your average P&L works for a restaurant, a pub, a cafe. We've worked off, pay rates that have always been at a lower level, rightly or wrongly. But at the end of the day, if we're going to pay above national living wage, we have to charge prices that consumers are not willing to accept. So there's a real, it's a vicious circle in many respects. But I just think that, I really wish that there would be more of a national recognition of the fact that we're a great sector, we're great employers, we're really good. UK hospitality is a really, really good, vibrant example of hospitality, worldwide. If you look at, people have always been of the view that, food in the UK is not as good as it is on the continent. The restaurants aren't as good quality. That's complete nonsense now. And if you look at a business, say like Soho House, for example, where they've exported British hospitality to the world and have done it incredibly successfully. So I think we're very, it's a very British thing. We're very good at talking ourselves down and not really necessarily celebrating our success, but also, I think, as I say, there needs to be a sea change with regards to how people see it. People need to see it as an opportunity to get involved in something that is very, very hands-on, that is very, very fast-paced, is really enjoyable, and actually that you can progress very rapidly through the ranks and earn a lot of money doing it. Because it's not as if we pay national living wage at every level. Once you get to sort of general manager, head chef, and then into ops, you're earning proper money. And it's sort of, that frustrates me that people see, they don't see the prospect, they just see the entry level.
Absolutely. Now, one thing, there were three of you that started lounges. Obviously, like you had Nick, who came in as your chief exec, and you took the step back into kind of chairman. Some entrepreneurs struggle a little bit with control, Alex, believe it or not, and we sometimes kind of like meet some of these people, but you've always seemed to kind of been, from an external perspective, you've always seemed to be able to kind of like hand that over, not freely, but kind of like, definitely kind of like in a very measured kind of like way. Can you tell us, like, have you had any challenges with that? Do you still want to get involved in the detail a lot? Do you have to take 5 minutes and control yourself? How do you manage that?
I don't know. Maybe Nick would answer this question differently. To me, I love and enjoy collaboration, and I love and enjoy sharing success. I think, perhaps because there were three of us in the first place. When Dave exited the business in 2012, he was one of the three co-founders. Nick at that time joined the business, so Nick almost sort of replaced Dave in that sort of trio. And three is a good number because there's always going to be a casting vote if there's ever any disagreement. But I can honestly say, the amount of times that we've had heated words at the senior level within the business in what is almost 24 years of existence, I can count on one hand. We're very bought into what we're doing. We're very driven. We're very excited. But we are very collaborative. And at the end of, we want to, we're enjoying the journey. The journey is slightly mad when you sit back and reflect where we've come from and where we are now. But there's nobody's jockeying for position. There's no one with agendas. It's a very, very, democratic, very, very collegiate group of people that run the business at a senior level. And I think that permeates down through the business. So there is a sense of it being, we're doing things for the right reason, and we're working hard because it is hard. It's very easy to convince yourself that you don't, you can compromise away the things that made the business special when it was small, because it's impossible to continue to enjoy that whilst it's big. And that to me is just complete nonsense. I think it is harder to keep those standards up and to keep that culture alive, but it's also imperative, because if you don't, that's where the business starts to unravel. And I think, we've always been of the view that it is harder work, but we enjoy that, and that's sort of what gets us out of bed in the morning and keeps us focused on what we're doing, and why we've had so much success.
Absolutely. And regarding that success in those moments when, I don't know, when you feel that success, is it winning Business Leader of the Year at the Publican Awards? Is it standing at Lounge Fest in a field surrounded by a couple of thousand loungettes? Is it, opening a site in Germany? What gives you that moment of like, I've made it? Or have you had that moment yet?
I mean, I get my sort of kicks across the year, really. So, it's like walking into a new potential opportunity, and just going, wow, this could be an amazing land or an absolutely beautiful cozy club. I get that sort of hit. I guess the opening new sites on a regular basis and seeing how they shoot the lights out from a sales perspective provides an awful lot of gratification. Awards are very, very nice, and clearly I've been fortunate enough to be recognised by my peers on a number of occasions, and that's very gratifying. But I think you mentioned it, but standing on a stage at Loungefest, which is our annual staff party, and I think we were sort of over 5,000 this year,
Wow.
and looking at that. Normally sort of standing shoulder to shoulder with Jake, who obviously was the third co-founder, and just thinking, my God, how has this happened? And all of these people are in this field, enjoying this massive festival that's costing us hundreds of thousands of pounds to put on, because we had that funny little idea to open a 10-table cafe bar in suburban Bristol in 2002. When you think back and reflect on that is very gratifying. The amount of jobs that have been created, but the amount of life experiences that we have influenced, be it people that have met and fallen in love in a lounge or a cozy club from either a customer perspective or a staff perspective, members of staff that have got married and have families. It's just that is, I mean, it blows your mind a bit. And I always find Loungefest, it is one of those mind-blowing moments where you just sort of think, why would you want to walk away from this? It's sort of like, this is just, you get an enormous sense of achievement. And as I said, we could wallow in the financial achievements of the business, and we obviously we've enjoyed a lot of financial success. But for me, the people side of what we've achieved and the lives we've positively impacted, and I guess the butterfly effect of opening a lounge or a cozy club in a town, I find that really blows my mind, and it's when I feel the most amount of pride, maybe a slight bit of terror, because you're sort of thinking, Christ, we're responsible for all these people, but it's that's where you really sort of feel like actually what we've achieved is something really quite special.
Love health and safety kicks in at some point, right? Love that. Now, I do have to ask a little question about the ownership side of things, because like you guys obviously grew extremely quickly. There was listing, there's been delisting, Fortress have kind of like come involved. It sounds like a journey kind of like within itself, but not a journey that we haven't heard of from other organizations who have listed and are looking at delisting and that side of things as well. If there are organizations out there that are looking at doing that, can you just give us a little bit about which ownership structure you found most conducive and why you've decided to go with the current one that you have?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we took private equity investment in 2012. That was our first PE investor, which was Piper Private Equity, who had invested in numerous businesses in the sector over the years. They then sold, and we got Lion Capital, who invested in the very late 2016. Then we IPO'd the business on the London Stock Exchange in April 2019. We obviously remained listed until February last year, when we took the business private and took it off the stock exchange in a deal that was primarily led by Fortress, but was meant that Lion founders and management effectively also sort of held significant stakes of the business going forward. Private equity has been very good for us. I think a lot of people are very wary of private equity. I think, like lots of things in life, private equity come in all shapes and sizes, and you've got to be very conscious of picking the right kind of partners for you, and that's how you need to see it. It's a partnership. It's not an overlord that's going to come in and want to try and run your business differently. They're there to, their job is to sort of provide a great return for their investors, and generally these people that work for private equity have got brains the size of planets, and they've got a perspective, but they certainly don't want to be running the business, and they just want to be able to help and I think we've really enjoyed the challenge of that. We've enjoyed the fact that that we've got people around a board table that ask questions from a different perspective, and are really acutely focused on how we can be better as a business. And that is not just a financial measure. The private equity partners we've had over the years have been, they've been very focused on how do you improve people, how do you improve culture. It isn't just about numbers, because the view is if the business is better and we're focusing on making the business better, the financials often will just take care of themselves. Floating on the London Stock Exchange was obviously a major milestone for the business, and I think we always felt that would be the permanent home for loungers. But for whatever reason, UK fund managers are very, very bearish on anything UK consumer, particularly hospitality, but also they'd be similarly bearish on things like retail, the retail sector as well. And consequently, it doesn't make for a very positive environment. And we got very frustrated at the fact that, our share price over the course of the sort of 5+ years that we were listed barely moved, despite the fact that our business had, we doubled turnover, over double profitability. We'd under-promised, over-delivered. We'd done everything that we were told that we needed to do to be successful as a PLC, and none of that was moving the needle. So I think we took the decision that actually we wanted to be back in sort of private hands, back really where the decisions that we make as a business are made around a board table and not influenced by what fund managers and shareholders in the business might think, who are very generalists. They're very intelligent people, but they're not in any shape or form specialists with regards to hospitality. So it was a very arduous, quite fractious, quite unpleasant experience for us to remove ourselves from the stock exchange, but we were very pleased that we did it. And I think, if I look at where our share price was 2 years ago, and imagine where it would have been today, and by comparing it to our peers that are still PLCs, it's pretty clear that our view, which was that unfortunately the London Stock Exchange was very stagnant, was completely bang on, because nobody's share price has moved in the last 2 years. So I think it allows us a bit more freedom. We don't you don't have to sort of go and meet with your shareholders every 6 months, and putting out announcements. You can just get your head down and crack on, which sort of suits us. I mean, we were fine in a PLC environment. We found that we adapted to the challenge of that fairly well. It's just, I think, unfortunately, the landscape at the moment within the UK with regards to appetite from UK fund managers, and consequently any international fund managers that may look at London listed businesses, means that being a PLC is a hard slog.
Yeah, sounds like it. Feedback we get from elsewhere as well. Now, for our two last questions, I can't kind of let you on an interview without asking about your social media profile, your love of X. You very infamously took on Boris Johnson through the pandemic as well, which I think we were all rooting for as well. But you manage that yourself, I assume, and you don't manage that masked through a PR company or something like that as well. No judgment to those who do, but I'm sure there's two sides of that in terms of people that also come back personally in that side of things as well. Can you just give us a little bit about, do you have a strategy when it comes to that? Do you shoot from the hip?
No, I mean, I shoot from the hip, and I think one of the nice things about not being a PLC is I don't really have to think about what I'm saying anymore. Whereas before, I'd have to be I might have to check what I'm saying, or maybe because I knew full well that lots of our investors, our institutional investors, would follow me on X, and I mean, I still call it Twitter because I still can't understand why they changed the name of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess. Yeah, I mean, for me, particularly during the pandemic, it was something that people used to sort of communicate through. Really, I mean, it was, and we saw, just a plethora of complete nonsense, obviously, with regards to how, hospitality was viewed, and how we were being asked to sort of consider, how we would potentially trade. And I guess, I don't pull any punches when it comes to sort of, airing my opinions on that, because it would be very easy for me, I think, given the size of our business and given the fact that some of the problems, severe problems that the sector is facing, we're not immune from, but we're less impacted because of the size of the business. We were a small business not that long ago, and I can empathise and sympathise and understand, what small business owners in our sector are going through. And the simple fact of the matter is, if we survived the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and at the time had sort of 7-8 sites. And I think if we had 7 or 8 sites now, I think our chances of survival would be significantly diminished. And clearly, we've gone on to create thousands of jobs. And, my worry is that the big businesses of the future will fail through no fault of their own, just because they're being overtaxed, and the expectation of how much they have to give up of their P&L in order to survive is just unrealistic. And so I think I worry about the state of the sector from a point of view of we're seeing. There's always been a case where poor businesses will ultimately fail because they're just not good enough. But we're seeing good businesses fail, and dare I say, we might see great businesses fail, and that would be a real travesty. So I will always fight for the brotherhood in many respects, because we've been there ourselves, and we know how difficult it is, and we know how much sacrifice people make, both financially and emotionally, and it's a hard thing to accept failure when actually what you're doing as an operator is really good. If it's not good, then you have to look yourself in the mirror a little bit. But there are far too many examples now where we're seeing businesses that are failing, that are just great businesses, and they shouldn't be failing.
Absolutely. A final question: flash forward 5 years' time. I mean, is it going to be an even bigger head office? I'm joking, but how many countries are going to be in? Don't know. But what would success look like for you 5 years' time when you're looking at your business plan?
I think we would like to think that that our sort of EBITDA would be beyond 100 million by that point. I'd like to think that we will, potentially have opened something internationally, and maybe we're building a bit more of an international presence. That land stretch just keeps on getting bigger and bigger, because we're opening more and more sites, and we're creating more and more jobs. And that actually within the business, we're really beginning to see some of the great talent that we've got, sort of really create problems for us in terms of us having to sort of find bigger and better roles for the people that we've got, because we've got a great bunch of people that work for the business, and we're seeing a lot of talent coming through, which is really encouraging. I mean, I guess the fact we're growing, we might perhaps be seen as a bit more of a winning team, and people want to be part of a winning team, and then perhaps be more reassured from a job security perspective that actually Loungers is a safer environment to be in. But yeah, so I think we're more of the same is probably not what I'm saying, because we'll do more of the same. Plus, we'll keep on growing Lounge, we'll keep on adding the odd Cosy Club. Hopefully, Brightside will be something that we'll be thinking more expansively about. But we've got ambition beyond that. And I think that the next 5 years is our time to really start realising that.
America calling?
I don't think I'm not sure about the States. But there's a lot of European countries for us to be focused on. So if we do something in Germany, who knows, we might do something in other European countries. You never know.
Excellent. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed chatting to you and hearing all about the story. It's really impressive. And next time I see you, we can hopefully have another chat about self-furnishing.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.